guys, Dr. D here. We got another video. This is part 2. Sick today, I can't come in, so we'll pick up where we left off. Here we go. Okay, sweet. So at this point we have pretty much everything set up with EQ and some compression across the board here. Just to get reacquainted to the mix, what I'm going to do is listen to this thing and kind of just rebuild this mix. So what I mean by that is I'm going to turn down all of the sums. Okay, so I've got the drum sum, I've got the guitar sum, I've got the vox sums, and I'm going to turn those tracks kind of all the way down and then bring them up and balance these instruments. So there's the vocals, there's the bass, guitar, the drums, the guitar, and then the sum of the vocals. So I'm going to leave the vocals actually back in unity, and I'm going to find a part of the song where there's some singing. So start with second verse here, I guess.
The protester has crossed the line to find the money's on the other side. Can I get it?
Okay, so I want to make the voice a little bit louder maybe. It looks like the meter right here is only bringing the voice up to about like -10 decibels. I want that to be a little bit higher, like more like, 6. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a bomb factory compressor on that voice and kind of give it a listen here. Got a slight amount of compression happening, and I'm probably going to maybe turn up the output gain just a little bit. So I'm using this more for dynamic purposes, not like I'm compressing. I want to compress it so much. I'm really just trying to get the volume up a touch. And then I'm going to listen to it, make sure it's not sounding worse.
Plastic bag on a monument. The protester has crossed the line to find the...
Okay, cool. So I've got a pretty good strong vocal signal. Now I'm going to bring in, next to the vocal, I'm going to bring in the drum set, balance the drum set against the voice, and then bring in the bass, and then bring in the guitars, and kind of like make sure everything is kind of like sounding even and clear and everything. So like I said, I'll just have the voice up here, and I'm going to bring the drums up.
Can I get another amen? There's a flag wrapped around a score of men, a gag, a plastic bag on a monument. The protester has crossed the line to find the money's on the other side.
Okay, then I'll bring in the bass next to it.
The protester has crossed the line to find the money's on the other side.
And then the guitars.
Can I get another amen? There's a flag wrapped around a score of men, a gag, a plastic bag on a monument.
Okay.
The protester has crossed the line to find...
Okay, cool. So, I want to find the balance point, make that stuff sound equally balanced. I want to hear the kick and the snare. I want to hear the voice. Those are really important things: kick, snare, voice. And then the bass, kind of like, I feel like it fits around those sounds. So I bring in the bass, kind of like fill in the swimming pool with low frequency sounds that kind of like support the low end. Kind of find the tipping point where it's too much, and then bring it back. And then bring in the guitars kind of around that, once again kind of filling in the space around the kick and the snare and the voice. So that's kind of what I'm listening to while I do this. Cool. Personally, for me, I'm probably going to get in here and do a few adjustments, listening to this again. I want to do some work on the drums, probably add some verb on various things like snare and some of the overheads and stuff like that. And kind of take another stab at doing that. But what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do it in front of you, but what I would do is I would pull up this reference and listen to the reference track, get an idea of like what those like the volume of that mix like overall, like just the amount of like space that's being taken up by all the upper frequencies and low frequencies. Like I said earlier, I had to bring down the volume of that reference mix to make it match what my mix sounds like. So I'm listening to that, trying to be like, is there enough reverb? Is there enough high frequencies, enough low frequencies? Is the voice balanced enough? So I'm using that reference track as kind of a benchmark. So I'll probably go through there and readjust all that, do a little bit of work to it. Okay, so say you've done that, and I've done that, and I'm kind of happy with things. The next thing we want to do is kind of prepare this for mastering, for bouncing, more or less. So we want to get this out of the machine and bounce it as kind of like the final step, but we need to match the reference track in dynamics and also, a little bit of tone checking. So we'll do volume fixing first. So obviously, like when I turn this reference track all the way up to unity gain, up to 0 here, and I hit play, it's going to be way louder than my mix. So it's a big difference volume-wise, So first of all, I want to bring up the volume of my mix. So the way I'm going to do that is on the very first insert slot of the submix, I'm going to put an EQ7 on there. I'm not going to do EQ stuff yet, but my first slot is going to be the EQs because I'll use that down the road. But next is going to be from the dynamics category, I'm going to find the maxim. Okay, the maxim, this is a limiter, so this will basically enhance the volume of my track. And this is something I want to do very subtly. Okay, so subtly I mean like I'm going to barely have this thing showing any attenuation, which is the amount of gain reduction. So this, there's 3 buttons here, three things I want to look at. I have the threshold, which is basically the volume setting at which I can bring the volume threshold down into the point to where it starts interacting with the highest volume points of the track, and that part basically starts to trigger the limiter to suppress the volume. The ceiling, it basically determines the maximum output volume. So a lot of times I leave it at 0, or it's just one touch below 0. The ceiling, since this is a limiter and not a compressor, compressors have a little bit of squish and give and take to like they're turning down and turning up with the volume and all that. So with the ceiling, it's a limited brick wall. So it's like whatever the output ceiling is, that's where the volume is going to go. There's no like exceeding that or anything. So they call it a ceiling because limiters are like compressors in the way that they turn volume down and up, but they do it in a way where there's no give and take. It's just like this is the threshold, none shall pass kind of thing. And then I'm looking at the attenuation, which is how much volume reduction is happening. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I'll hit play here. Maybe I'll find the loudest part of the song. Maybe I'll go and find like the chorus or something. Pretty loud at that chorus. So this sucker's playing. I'm going to turn the threshold down until I start to see some sort of attenuation. So the numbers are going into the negatives, -2, -3, whatever, and until I reach the point at which it starts to interact with the peaks of the volumes. So the input is peaking out at like -6, -5 dB over here. So I'm going to find that point to where it starts to interact, and then I'll see the attenuation here start showing a reading. There it goes. So now there's like 0.7, 1.5 decibels of attenuation. Ooh, 3.7, too much. I don't want to even see 2. So I'm going to back this sucker up and reset that. And I've got -8 decibels of, the threshold set at -8. I'm still getting a reading every now and then, almost at 2, too much. So I'm going to stay safe here. I'm going to keep it at like 7, maybe even less, maybe even like 6. I want this attenuation to like barely even happen, Because if this attenuation is happening too much, if there's like 2 or 3 or 5 dB of gain reduction or attenuation, you're going to be really distorting, mangling that signal, and I don't want to do that. So I've got this set at like negative 6 almost. I might just go back up to negative 5 and just be really kind of out of the way of any attenuation happening. I am bringing the volume up. Like if I hit bypass it and I turn it back on, you can hear the volume got louder, right? So I've got one of these at negative 5 threshold, barely showing any attenuation, really not showing any, and it's not loud enough, right? If I hit play here and turn on my reference track mix, it's much louder still. It's getting closer though. Okay, so what I can do to keep going with this is duplicate this plugin or use another one. I could load in another Maxim plugin from the Dynamics category, and I'll just bring the threshold down a little bit more. You know, maybe 2 or something, so I start to see a bit. There we go. I'm seeing some attenuation happening. Once I see attenuation, I want to back it off. I don't want to really have much attenuation at all. Now at this point, look at these meters down here. Look at my master. My master is what the signal is coming out of the speakers. This is my mastered final volume. And then when I go back to my reference, you can see I'm in the same vicinity. Like it's peaking basically. You know, like this song's loud. So is mine. So dynamically, this is how I get my mixes to be in the same place. This is how you master something dynamically. Is you use limiters. You can stage them. You know, limiter after limiter after limiter. Sometimes I'll even do 3 of these things. Like maybe this one, it's negative 5 dB threshold. This one's at negative 2. You know, I could have maybe gone and used 3 of these things and had all 3 of them at negative 2. Ceiling, negative 2 threshold, but basically every step it bumps up the volume a little bit, and I do it in stages so that it's not overdone. Like one of these limiters, if it boosted all the volume in one limiter, I would hear like distortion and coloring of the sound, and I want this to be transparent, not adding any distortion. So you really have to listen hard when you're doing this stage of the limiting, and you know, for your mastering, you want to listen to your mix and make sure that it's not like peaking, or that it's not distorting or having any other like negative side effects of this. So, you know, one of the ways of doing that is, you know, crank your speakers, turn off these limiters. You know, get an idea of like the clarity of the mix, and then throw them back on. And make sure that you're not getting, you know, distortion or any kind of weird pumping sounds from the compressor, turning the volume down and up and all that good stuff. So anyway, you kind of check that out. You get your dynamics to a certain level. Now the tracks are at the same volume, and I'm free to kind of listen to frequencies and listen to balance of the mixes. You know, because now that the volumes are the same from reference track to my mix, I can more accurately kind of judge whether my tone is too dark or too bright, or I need more cymbals, or the voice is too quiet, and I can fix the mix, you know, by going over here to the faders and adjusting whatever I need to do. But also I can do some subtle EQ fixing with the EQ that's on the submix. And that's why we kind of created this submix track, is because I can do my mastering here on the submix, and it's not affecting the reference track. You know, if I would have done everything EQ and compression and limiting and stuff on my master track, this reference track feeds into the master track, and therefore like it's going to affect that reference track. But when I have the submix, this is my mix, this is the reference, this is the master track. They both feed into this master track before they go out. So if that makes sense. But anyway, so I want to listen real hard, see if I hear any differences in bass or high frequencies, or if there's anything I can do, and then I can make adjustments, and then I can use some subtle EQ corrections to adjust my mix and make it sound a little bit darker or brighter, or more bass or more high frequencies, whatever it needs to happen to get it balanced. I can do that subtly with the EQ on the submix, or I can do that by adjusting my mix over here. You know, I still have access to my entire mix, so adjust things there. So I'm going to listen to that, kind of make some changes and adjustments, get things sound as close as I can to my reference mix. So my reference mix has enough bass, or my reference mix is what I use to judge whether my mix has enough bass, enough high end, it's loud enough, it's got enough kick and snare pumping and thumping. And I listen to all those little individual things and go back and forth between the reference and my mix, make adjustments and kind of get things to sound as close as I can to that reference mix. If your mixes sound like Black Keys and produced by Dan Auerbach, like it's good. It's gonna be a good mix. And if you do those checks, everything will sound pretty much in the ballpark. Okay, so you do that, you get that stuff sounding as good as you can. Then the final step is to bounce. All right, so when you bounce, this session here is at a higher sample rate than what is the standard commercial sample rate for mixes. CD quality sound is 44.1 kilohertz and 16-bit. Now our session is at 24 bit 48 kilohertz. So it's a higher sample rate, so we have to downsample it. And when we do that, we want to use this thing called dithering. This isn't super important. If you don't do this, like, you're not going to even hear the difference, but it's just one of those steps that people do when they master. And what you will do is, if you go to your Maxim plugin, the very last Maxim plugin. So this is the last plugin that your mix passes through as it heads out to the speakers. So this very last plugin here, I have a dithering button, or I can turn on the dithering, and it's set to 16 bit. So that's the bit depth. You're downsampling to 16-bit from the 24, and you're doing it at this final plugin. So you want to do that. It kind of helps the sound clarity and stuff. It's kind of hard to tell if you don't do it or not, but it's something that engineers do when they master. So do that, and then what we have to do is set the beginning and ending of this track. So as you can see over here, the guitar is the first thing that starts the song. Okay. So the first thing we're going to hear is that guitar playing the rhythm part right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm in slip mode. I'm going to trim very, very close to where this guitar track starts. Get way in there like this, and put a little fade that doesn't touch the audio, but right before it. You can kind of see right there, I'm right before it. And when I hit play, if I set this as my beginning marker for the track, like, it's going to start playing right away. As soon as I hit the space bar, boom, or hit the play button, boom, it plays immediately. I don't want a bunch of pause or dead air in the beginning of my song. Who wants that? So at the end of the track too, I need to find out where the things kind of wrap up with the track. So it looks like we got feedback, guitar, ending kind of dealio right here. So it's a little long. I don't know if I want my track to do that, but if I want to trim the ending, I can select and delete. I can put fades on the outros of these things. The drums might need them too, but I can also do like a group fade where I just select across a bunch of tracks and hold down Option Shift and do that, and then I put little, like, fade out on almost everything. It's good to do little fade outs in case there's a pop or crack or something. Track ends. Yeah, so that's a good spot to end. So I'm going to select the entire guitar track, really. Making sure, because this is the first thing that happens, is this guitar track, and it's also the last thing that happens with the fade out. So if my track plays between this selection point with this blue arrow and that selection point, like I hit play, song starts, blah, 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 plays all the way through the fade out here at the end, that's what I want to bounce. So I got to select that region where you're going to have like dead air and then dead air on the back end of your track. So you don't want that when you're mastering. You want to have like clean start and like the fade, the length, all kind of preset. So with that selected, and make sure that your reference track is muted, and you're happy with your mix and your master and everything's sounding great, you're going to go and bounce this now. So you got File, Bounce to Disk. Now, for this class, I want you to submit this with as an MP3. You would probably do this as a WAV file, and that would be what you would upload to the internet, or that's what you would burn to your CDs or whatever. But if it's like online stuff and MP3s, and you're sending this stuff around, just keep it as MP3. So MP3 interleaved, and then you want to name it. So, MUS 163 Holiday, Dr. D Mix, or Mix 1 or something. Okay. Now, if I was also really serious about this, I would listen to this, bounce this mix, listen to it on different speakers, get an idea of what it sounds like in my headphones and in my speakers and in different spaces, come back, make adjustments, redo this, mix number 2, mix number 3, and this is the process for getting your mix to sound really good everywhere. You have to listen to it everywhere. So anyway, MP3 interleaved, name it, choose the location of where it's going to go. I'm going to make mine go to my desktop so I can find it, and then offline bounce is okay. Go ahead and hit bounce. This is the MP3 encoder. Bounce it. There it goes. It's bouncing, and then I'll find it over here somewhere on my desktop once it's done. And I want to make sure it works by listening to it. So if I select it and hit spacebar. Okay, cool. The whole thing sounds good. That's what you're going to turn in. So yeah, once you have that done, you turn that sucker into D2L. Like I said, I don't have D2L open. No. But yeah, you put that in the Dropbox. If there's a write-up portion, which I'm not quite sure if there is, do whatever the directions say. Let me jump back in here real quick and just double check. This is 163. Okay, yeah, so this will be due on Wednesday. We're going to listen to this sucker on Wednesday. So hopefully you can wrap this up today. Let me make sure that there is not a write-up full band project. This is number project 4. I forget if we're doing a write-up on this. This comes in on holiday recording project. Yeah, no write-up on this one. I don't remember if I don't think I meant it to be a write-up. So yeah, no write-up. Just turn in the mix and we'll listen to them on Wednesday. Cool. All right. Well, cool. Good luck with everything, and hopefully I'll not have COVID and I'll be able to come to class on Wednesday. And we'll see you then.